Tashma Shila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Gosai Maharaj Shila Gurudev Ki Jai. Nitila Pavishram Vishnupara Tashma Shila Bhakti Vedanta Vaman Gosai Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitila Pavishram Vishnupara Tashma Shila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Shila
It's 7
Prabhupada Ki Jai.
o'clock.
Nitila Pavishram Vishnupara Tashma Shila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Gosai Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashitashma Chila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Gosai Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishta Mahabhagavat Chila Goksharas Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishta Shila Satchiraranda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishta Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Shila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Rupano Gauriya Guru Varga Ki Jai. Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopal Patidasha Gunath Shara Gosai Prabhu Ki Jai. Shri Surup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda Ki Jai. Nama Chaishla Hairas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Kshetra Mandala Gaura Mandala Vraja Mandala Mathura Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Sarva Abhishta Pradata Giriraj Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Radha Kund Shama Kund Ki Jai. Shri Muna Devi Ganga Devi Ki Jai. Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Shri Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Purnamasi Yogamaya Ki Jai. Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Grantaraj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Ki Jai. Shinitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo. Om Vrindaya Tulsi Devaya Priyaya Keshavashacha. Sorry, I was just looking at my Tulsi Devi and I started saying Pranam Mantra to the baby. Okay. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Radhikaya Priyatmane Shri Śrīmad-Bhakti Vedanta Narayanati Namine. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Śrīmate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Namo mahavadanyaya Krishna prema pradayate Krishnaya Krishna chaitanya namne gauratishe namaha. Guruve gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tadalaya Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tarbhaktaya Namo Namaha. Ito Nrsingo Parato Nrsingo Yato Yato Yamitato Nrsingo Bahir Nrsingo Hridaye Nrsingo Nrsingam Adim Sharanam Prapade. Yam pravrajantam anupetam apeta krityam dvaipayano virahakatara ajuhavo putreti tanmayataya taravo bhinedustang sarva bhuta hridayam munimanatosmi. Narayanam namaskritya narang chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam udirayet. Shrinvatang Swakatha Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Ridantasto Yabhadrani Vidhunoti Suritsatam Nashta Prayeshvavadreshu Nityang Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Tavai Vasmi Na Jivami Tvaya Vinay Iti Vigyaya Radhe Tvam Nayamam Charanantikam. Bhaktya Vihina Aparada Lakshay Kshiptashtakama Ditaranka Madhe Kripa Maitam Sharanam Prapanna Vrinde Namaste Charana Ravindam Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Alright, so we're on, in the second chapter, we're on verse 13. There. Alright, so let's see what we read the other day. So the Supreme Lord is equal to everyone. Pariksha inquires about the Lord's apparent partiality. Lord Vishnu is pure, equal, dear and friendly to everyone. So how does he kill the demons and favor the demigods? Then Shukadeva Goswami responds, this is a wonderful question about Bhagavan, Bhagavat, the devotee, and Bhakti. Lord Vishnu is the controller of the three modes. People flourish according to the prominences of the modes, under the influence of time. But the Lord is not partial. Yeah, so it's just how the devotee acts. What is it? Yayata mam prapadyante tang sataiva. Yeah, however a person acts, however a person approaches him, then Bhagavan reciprocates. So Yudhishthir. So now Shukadeva Goswami tells the story about when Yudhishthir Maharaj asked Yudhishthir asked Narad about the Lord's mercy on the demons. So at the Rajasuya sacrifice of Yudhishthir, Lord Krishna beheaded envious Shishupal, who then merged into the Lord's body. Yudhishthir asked Narad Muni, how could the envious Shishupal be liberated? Then Narad Muni describes the glory of absorption in Krishna. He says the material body is meant to experience dualities, and one who identifies with the body suffers. But the Lord has no material body, so he is unaffected. If one's thinking of Krishna, even with enmity or anger, leads to deep absorption in Krishna, one becomes liberated. Shishupal and Dantavakra were Jai and Vijay in Vaikuntha. Then Narad narrates the curse and three births of Jai and Vijay. Is that where we read from yesterday? I'm just checking 1 second. Yeah, we read from 22. Okay. We read from 36. Okay. So Yudhishthir asked Narad, how could the associates of Vishnu fall to the material world? And so then we'll start from here, 36. Yeah, so Shishupal and Dantavakra are formerly associates of Lord Vishnu named Jai and Vijay, being cursed by the Brahmins that came to this world as demons. So then Maharaj Yudhishthir asked, this is unbelievable. What curse could affect the servants of Lord Vishnu? They are exclusively dedicated to the Lord, and their bodies are purely spiritual. How could they fall to the material world? Please describe the curse that caused this. So then the Narad Muni describes the story of Jai and Vijay. Once the four Kumaras, Sanak, Sanandan, Sanatan, and Sanat Kumar, went to Vishnu Loka while wandering in the three worlds. They looked like 5-year-old children, although they were the eldest sons of Brahma. Thinking them to be ordinary children, the two gatekeepers of Vaikuntha, Jai and Vijay, forbade them to enter. The Kumars cursed Jai and Vijay. You are agitated by passion and ignorance, and are unfit to live at the lotus feet of Lord Madhudvisha. Take birth as demons in the material world. As Jai and Vijay were falling, the Kumaras told them kindly, your curse will end in 3 births and you'll be able to return to Vaikuntha. So in the first birth, Jai and Vijay thus descended to the material world as sons of Diti, Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha. They were killed by the Supreme Lord in his incarnations as Nrsimhadev and Varaha, respectively. Hiranyakashipu desired to kill his son Prahlad and tortured him in many ways, but he couldn't kill Prahlad as he was protected by Lord Vishnu, the Supersoul, and the equipoised Lord. In the second birth, they appeared as Ravan and Kumbhakarna, the sons of Vishrava and Keshini. The Lord appeared as Ramachandra and killed them. You may hear narrations about Lord Ram from Markandeya. In the third birth, they appeared as your cousins, Shishupal and Dantavakra. Being struck by the disc of being struck by the disc of Lord Krishna, they are now free from the curse. Salvation by absorption. They maintained a feeling of enmity towards the Lord for a long time. Because of always thinking of Krishna in this way, they regained the shelter of the Lord in Vaikuntha. Then Yudhishthira asked, why was there enmity between Hiranyakashipu and his beloved son Prahlad? How did Prahlad become such a great devotee of Krishna? So now, in the last verse of chapter 1, Yudhishthira Maharaj asked Narad Muni why Hiranyakashipu was envious of his own son Prahlad. In this chapter, Narad Muni narrates the story by explaining how Hiranyakashipu had become a staunch enemy of Lord Vishnu. So Hiranyakashipu's reaction after Hiranyaksha's death. When Hiranyaksha was killed by Lord Vishnu in the form of Varaha, his brother Hiranyakashipu became extremely angry and began to lament. Hiranyakashipu was filled with rage. Biting his lips, gazing at the sky with angry eyes, terrible teeth, fierce glances, and frowning eyebrows, he spoke to the demons. Hiranyakashipu instructs the demons, hear attentively and follow my words without delay, O Shambhara, Shatabahu, Namuchi, Viprachiti, Puloman, and others. Although Lord Vishnu is equal to all, he sided with the insignificant demigods, being worshipped by them and killed by my obedient he killed my obedient and well-wishing brother. Vishnu has given up his neutrality, being influenced by Maya. Just as a restless child takes sides, Vishnu, to please his devotees, the demigods, killed my brother in the form of a boar. I shall behead that diplomatic Vishnu with my trident. With his blood, I shall please my brother who is fond of sucking blood. When he is killed, all the demigods will wither away, just as when a tree's root is cut, the branches and twigs dry up. Kuto ahite, which means that diplomatic Vishnu, that's how they translated it here at least, indicates Vishnu has deceptive actions. But it also means Vishnu who fights against cheaters like me. Nashte can also mean that Vishnu becomes invisible, since he cannot be destroyed. The demigods live only for Vishnu, who is their life. When he appears from their sight, they will dry up out of separation. Sometimes the demons also appreciate the full dependence of the demigods upon the mercy of the Lord. This is indirect glorification of the demigods by the demons. Meanwhile, you destroy all people on the earth engaged in austerity, sacrifice, Vedic study, vows, and charity. Earth is flourishing due to Brahman's austerity and Kshatriya strength. Lord Vishnu has his root in the activities of the Dvijas, the Brahmins and Kshatriyas. He is the personification of sacrifices and religious principles, and the shelter of the demigods, sages, pitris, and all beings. So Hiranyakashipu's plan. His plan was to destruction of the Brahmins, by which destruction of Yagya and Dharma would take place, which would be the death of Lord Vishnu, which would lead to the death of the demigods. That was his thinking. So immediately go destroy places wherever there are cows and Brahmins, study of the Vedas, and activities of Varnashram. Burn the cities and cut down the trees. So then the demons execute Hiranyakashipu's orders. And let me just see who's all here now. Dandavat pranams Indira Mataji and Gargaraji and Madhavi Didi. Haribo Raseshwari Mataji. Oh yeah, is it possible to mute the background music? Totally. 1 second. Noise suppression. There. Is that good? Let me know if you can still hear it. If you can still hear it, then I will close my window. Alright, then Dandavat Pranams Prajumna Prabhu and Rup Manjari Didi, Mantra Murti Mataji. Ha, that is, yeah, probably. Same, no change. Okay. Okay, let me just close my doors and windows. Alright, that should do the trick, hopefully. Okay. Is it better now? I'll check back to see if it is. Alright. Let's... Alright, so where did we leave off? So, hey, what happened? Okay. So Hiranyakashipu said, immediately go to the places wherever there are cows, Brahmins, study of the Vedas and activities of Varnashram, burn the cities and cut down the trees. So that then the demigods execute Hiranyakashipu's orders. Itrite bhartri nirdesham adaya shirasadrita tata prajanam kadanam vidadhu kadana priya. Thus, the demons, being fond of disastrous activities, took Hiranyakashipu's instructions on their heads with great respect and offered him obeisances according to his directions. They engaged in envious activities directed against all living beings. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The followers of demoniac principles, as described here, are thoroughly envious of the general populace. In the present day, scientific advancement exemplifies such envy. The discovery of nuclear energy has been disastrous to people in general because demons all over the world are manufacturing nuclear weapons. The word kadana priya is very significant in this regard. The demoniac persons who want to kill the Vedic culture are extremely envious of the feeble citizens, and they act in such a way that ultimately their discoveries will be inauspicious for everyone. Jagato Hita. The 16th chapter of Bhagavad Gita fully explains how the demons engage in sinful activities for the destruction of the populace. Puragrama vrajodhyana kshetra rama shramakaran keta karvata goshangscha dadahu patanani cha. The demons set fire to the cities, villages, pasturing grounds, cow pens, gardens, agricultural fields, and natural forests. They burned the hermitages of the saintly persons, the important mines that produced valuable metals, the residential quarters of the agriculturalists, the mountain villages, and the villages of the cow protectors, the cowherdmen. They also burned the government capitals. Purport. The word udyan refers to places where trees are especially grown to produce fruits and flowers, which are most important for human civilization. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 9:26, Patram pushpam phalam toyam yome bhakta prayachati tarahang bhaktupahritam ashnami prayatatmana. If one offers me with love and devotion a leaf, a flower, fruit, or water, I will accept it. Fruits and flowers are very much pleasing to the Lord. If one wants to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he can simply offer fruits and flowers, and the Lord will be pleased to accept them. Our only duty is to please the Supreme Godhead. Sangsidir Haritoshanam. Whatever we do and whatever our occupation, our main purpose should be to please the Supreme Lord. All paraphernalia mentioned in this verse is especially meant for the satisfaction of the Lord, not the satisfaction of one's senses. The government, indeed the entire society, should be structured in such a way that everyone can be trained to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But unfortunately, especially in this age, na te vidu swartha gatim hi Vishnum. People do not know that the highest goal of human life is to please Lord Vishnu. On the contrary, like demons, they simply plan to kill Vishnu and be happy by sense gratification. Let me just make sure the sound is okay now. Oops. No, it's not that hot here, Manjari. Dandavat pranams, Yashji. Okay. Kechit kanitar bibhidhu setu prakara gopuran ajivyansh chichidur vrikshan kechit parashupanaya pradhan sharanana pradhan sharananyeke prajanam jalito mukhai. Some of the demons took digging instruments and broke down the bridges, the protective walls, and the gates, the gopuras, of the cities. Some took axes and began cutting the important trees that produced mango, jackfruit, and other sources of food. Some of the demons took firebrands and set fire to the residential quarters of the citizens. Purport. The cutting of trees is generally prohibited. In particular, trees that produce nice fruit for the maintenance of human society should not be cut. In different countries, there are different types of fruit trees. In India, the mango and jackfruit trees are prominent. And in other places, there are mango trees, jackfruit trees, coconut trees, and berry trees. Any tree that produces nice fruit for the maintenance of the people should not be cut at all. This is a shastric injunction. Evam viprakrite loke daitendranucharar muhu devang deva parityajya bhuvi cherur alakshitaha. Thus disturbed again and again by the unnatural occurrences caused by the followers of Hiranyakasipu, all the people had to cease the activities of Vedic culture. Not receiving the results of yajna, the demigods also became disturbed. They left their residential quarters in the heavenly planets and, unobserved by the demons, began wandering on the planet Earth to see the disasters. Purport. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, the performance of yajna brings reciprocal good fortune for both the human beings and the demigods. When the performances of yajna were stopped by the disturbances of the demons, the demigods were naturally bereft of the results of yajna and hampered in executing their respective duties. Therefore, they came down to the planet Earth to see how people had become disturbed and consider what to do. Hiranyakasipu bhrato samparetasya dhukitam kritva kato dakadini bhratri putran asantvayat. After performing the ritualistic observances for the death of his brother, Hiranyakasipu, being extremely unhappy, tried to pacify his nephews. There's a line missing. Shakunim shambaram drishtim bhuta santapanam vrikam Kalanabham Mahanabham Harishmashrum Atotkacham Tanmataram Rushabhanum Diting Cha Jananim Gira Shlakshnaya Deshakalagya Idamaha Janeshvara. O king, Hiranyakasipu was extremely angry, but since he was a great politician, he knew how to act according to the time and situation. With sweet words, he began pacifying his nephews, whose names were Shakuni, Shambhara, Drishti, Bhutasantapana, Vrika, Kalanabha, Mahanabha, Harishmashru, and Utkacha. He also consoled their mother, his sister-in-law, Rushabhanu, as well as his own mother, Diti. He spoke to them all as follows. Interesting, there's a Shri here. Shri Hiranyakasipu Ruvacha Ambamba he vaduputra Viramarhatas shochitum Ripor abhimukesh laghya Shuranam vada ipsitaha. Hiranyakashipu said, My dear mother, sister-in-law, nephew, and nephews, you should not lament for the death of a great hero, for a hero's death in front of his enemy is glorious and desirable. Bhutanamiha samvasa prapayani vasuvrate daivenaikatra nitanam unitanam sakarmabhi. My dear mother, in a restaurant or a place for drinking cold water, many travelers are brought together, and after drinking water, they continue to their respective destinations. Similarly, living entities join together in a family, and later, as a result of their own actions, they are led apart to their destinations. Purport. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimurdatma kartaham iti manyate. The bewildered soul, under the influence of the three modes of material nature, thinks himself the doer of activities, which are in actuality carried out by nature. It's Bhagavad Gita 3.27. All living entities act exactly according to the directions of Prakriti, material nature, because in the material world, we are fully under a higher control. All the living entities in this material world have come here only because they wanted to be equal to Krishna in enjoyment, and have thus been sent here to be conditioned by material nature in different degrees. In the material world, a so-called family is a combination of several persons in one home to fulfill the terms of their imprisonment. I like how Srila Prabhupada put that. That's really funny. As criminal prisoners scatter as soon as their terms are over, they are released. As their terms are over and they are released, all of us who have temporarily assembled as family members will continue our respective destinations. Another example given is that family members are like straws carried together by the waves of a river. Sometimes such straws mix together in whirlpools, and later, dispersed again by the same waves, they float alone in the water. Although Hiranyakashipu was a demon, he had Vedic knowledge and understanding. Thus, the advice given to his family members, his sister-in-law, mother, and nephews, was quite sound. The demons are considered highly elevated in knowledge, but because they do not use their good intelligence for the service of the Lord, they are called demons. The demigods, however, act very intelligently to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is confirmed in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 1.2.13 as follows. Atapumbir dvijasheshta varnashrama vibhagasha svanushtitasya dharmasya sangsiddhir haritoshanam. It is therefore concluded that the highest perfection one can achieve by discharging his prescribed duties, his dharma, according to caste divisions of life, is to please the Lord Hari. To become a demigod or to become godly, whatever one's occupation, one must satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Nitya Atma Vyaya Shuddha Sarvaga Sarvavit Para Dhatte Sav Atmano Lingam Mayaya Visrijan Gunan. The spirit soul, the living entity, has no death, for he is eternal and inexhaustible. Being free from material contamination, he can go anywhere in the material or spiritual worlds. He is fully aware and completely different from the material body, but because of being misled by the misuse of his slight independence, he is obliged to accept subtle and gross bodies created by the material energy and thus be subjected to so-called material happiness and distress. Therefore, no one should lament for the passing of the spirit soul from the body. Purport. Hiranyakasipu very intelligently described the position of the soul. The soul is never the body, but is always completely different from the body. Being eternal and inexhaustible, the soul has no death, but when the same pure soul desires to enjoy the material world independently, he is placed under the conditions of material nature and must therefore accept a certain type of body and suffer the pains and pleasures thereof. This is also described by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita 13:22. Karanam gunasangosya sad asad yoni janmasu. The living entity is born in different families or species of life because of being affected by the modes of material nature. When conditioned by material nature, the living entity must accept a certain type of body, which is offered by nature under the direction of the Supreme Lord. Ishvara sarvabhutanam hriddesherjuna tishtati brahmayan sarvabhutani yantra rudhani mayaya. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. Bhagavad Gita 18:61. The body is just like a machine, and according to the living entity's karma, he is offered a particular type of machine to move here and there under the control of material nature. This continues until he surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Mamiva ye prapadyante mayam etang tarantite. It's Bhagavad Gita 7:14. Until he surrenders, the conditioned soul is carried from life to life by the arrangement of material nature. Yatambasa prachalata tarava pichala iva chakshusha brahmyamanena drishyate chalati vabhu. The trees on the bank of a river. Because of the movements of the water, the trees on the bank of a river, when reflected on the water, seem to move. Similarly, when the eyes move because of some mental derangement, the land appears to move also. Purport. Sometimes, because of mental derangement, the land appears to be moving. A drunkard, for example, or a person with a heart disease, sometimes feels that the land is moving. Similarly, the reflections of trees in a flowing river also appear to move. These are the actions of Maya. Actually, the living entity does not move. Stanur achalo yam. The living entity does not take birth or accept death, but because of the transient, subtle, and gross bodies, the living entity appears to move from one place to another, or be dead and gone forever. As the great Bengali Vaishnav poet Jagarananda Pandit has said, Pishachi paile jeno mati channa hoy, maya grasta jiver hoy, se bhava udoy. According to this statement from the Prema Vivarta, when a living entity is conditioned by material nature, he is exactly like a person haunted by a ghost. One should therefore understand the fixed position of the spirit soul and how he is carried away by the waves of material nature to different bodies in different situations under lamentation and hankering. One achieves the success of life when he understands the constitutional position of his self and is undisturbed by the conditions created by material nature. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha. Evam gunar brahmyamane manasya vikalapuman yati tat samyatam bhatre hyalingo lingavaniva. In the same way, O my gentle mother, When the mind is agitated by the movements of the modes of material nature, the living entity, although freed from all the different phases of the subtle and gross bodies, thinks he has changed from one condition to another. Purport. As stated in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 10.84.13, Yasatma buddhi kunape tiktaktuke swadhi kalatra dishu bhoma ijyati yatirtha buddhi shalile nakarhichij janeshvabhigeshu sa eva gokara. A human being who identifies the body made of the three elements as a self, who considers the byproducts of the body to be his kinsmen, who considers the land of his birth worshipable, and who goes to a place of pilgrimage simply to bathe rather than to meet men of transcendental knowledge there, is to be considered like a cow or an ass. Although Hiranyakasipu was a great demon, he was not as foolish as the population of the modern world. Hiranyakasipu had clear knowledge of the spirit soul and subtle and gross bodies. But now we are so degraded that everyone, including exalted scientists, philosophers, and other leaders, is under the bodily conception of life, which is condemned in the Shastras. Saeva Gokara. Such persons are nothing but cows and asses. Hiranyakashipu advised his family members that although the gross body of his brother Hiranyaksha was dead, and they were aggrieved because of this, they should not lament for the great soul of Hiranyaksha, who had already attained his next destination. Atma, the spirit soul, is always unchanged. Avikala Puman. We are spirit souls, but when carried away by mental activities, manodharma, we suffer from so-called material conditions of life. This generally happens to non-devotees. Haravapaktasya kuto maharguna. Devotees may possess exalted material qualities, but because they are foolish, they have no good qualifications. The designations of the conditioned soul in the material world are decorations of the dead body. The conditioned soul has no information of the spirit and is exalted. The conditioned soul has no information of the spirit and its exalted existence beyond the effects of the material condition. Esha atma viparyaso ya linge linga bhavana. Esha priya priya yoga viyoga karma sangsriti. Sambhavascha vinashascha shokoscha vividhasmrita. Avivekascha chintacha vivekasmritirevacha. In his bewildered state, the living entity accepting the body and minds to be the self, considers some people his kinsmen and others to be outsiders. Because of this misconception, he suffers. Indeed, the accumulation of such concocted material ideas is the cause of suffering and so-called happiness in the material world. The conditioned soul thus situated must take birth in different species and work in various types of consciousness, thus creating new bodies. This continued material life is called samsara. Birth, death, lamentation, foolishness, and anxiety are due to such material considerations. Thus, we sometimes come to a proper understanding and sometimes fall again to a wrong conception of life. Atrapudaharanti man itihasam puratanam yamasya preta bandhunam samvadam tam nipodatha. In this regard, an example is given from an old history. This involves a discourse between Yamaraj and the friends of a dead person. Please hear it attentively. Purport. The words itihasam puratanam mean an old history. The Puranas are not chronologically recorded, but the incidents mentioned in the Puranas are actual histories of bygone ages. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is the Mahapuran, the essence of all Puranas. The Mayavadi schools do not accept the Puranas, but Srila Madhvacharya and all other authorities accept them as the authoritative histories of the world. Ushinare Shvabudraja Suyajña iti Vishruta Sapatner Nihato Yude Gyatayastam Upasata. In the states known as Ushinara, there was a celebrated king named Suyajña. When the king was killed in battle by his enemies, his kinsmen sat down around the dead body and began to lament the death of their friend. Vishirna ratna kavacham vibhrashtra bharana srajam sharanir bhinna hridayam shayanam asrigavilam prakirna kesham dhvastaksham rabasa dachadram chatachadam rajakunta mukambojam chinayuda bhujam rite Ushinarendram vidina tata kritam pate mahishya prasamikshya dukita atasmanateti karar uro brisham gnantyo muhushtat padayor upapatam. His golden bejeweled armor smashed his His golden jeweled God, I'm having a hard time reading all this. His golden bejeweled armor smashed. His ornaments and garlands fell from their places. His hair scattered and his eyes lusterless. The slain king lay on the battlefield, his entire body smeared with blood, his heart pierced by the arrows of the enemy. When he died, he had wanted to show his prowess, and thus he had bitten his lips, and his teeth remained in that position. His beautiful lotus-like face was now black and covered with dust from the battlefield. His arms, with his sword and other weapons, were cut and broken. When the queens of the king of Ushinara saw their husband lying in that position, they began crying, "O Lord, now that you have been killed, we also have been killed." Repeating these words again and again, they fell down, pounding their breasts at the feet of the dead king. Purport. As stated here, Rabhasa Dashta Dachadam, the dead king, while fighting in anger, bit his lips to show his prowess, but nonetheless he was killed by providence, Vidhina. This proves that we are controlled by higher authorities. Our personal power or endeavor is not always supreme. We must therefore accept the position offered to us by the order of the Supreme. Rudatya uchirtaitangri pankajam shinchante asray kuchakunkumarunai visrasta kesha bharana shuchamdrinam srijanta akrandanaya vilepire. As the queens loudly cried, their tears glided down their breasts, becoming reddened by kumkum powder, and fell upon the lotus feet of their husband. Their hair became disarrayed, their ornaments fell, and in a way that evoked sympathy from the hearts of others, the queens began lamenting their husband's death. Aho vitatra karunena na prabho pavan pranito drigagocharam dasham ushinaranam asivrittida pura krito dhunayena shucham vivardhana. Sorry, I just needed to yawn. O Lord, you have now been removed by cruel providence to a state beyond our sight. You had previously sustained the livelihood of the inhabitants of Ushinar, and thus they were happy, but your condition now is the cause of their unhappiness. Taya kritan gena vayamahipate katam vinasyama suhritamenate tratanuyanam tava virapadayo Shushrus Shatinam Deshayatrayasyasi. O king, O hero, you are a very grateful husband and the most sincere friend of all of us. How shall we exist without you? O hero, wherever you are going, please direct us there so that we may follow in your footsteps and engage again in your service. Let us go along with you. Purport. Formerly, a Kshatriya king was generally the husband of many wives, and after the death of the king, especially in the battlefields, all the queens would agree to accept Saha Maran, dying with the husband who is their life. When Pandu Maharaj, the father of the Pandavas, died, his two wives, namely the mother of Yudhishthira, Bhima, and Arjuna, and the mother of Nakula and Sahadev, were both ready to die in a fire with their husband. Later, after a compromise was arranged, Kunti stayed alive to take care for the little children, and the other wife, Madri, was allowed to die with her husband. This system of Sahamaran continued in India even after the time of British rule, but later it was discouraged, since the attitude of wives gradually changed with the advancement of Kali Yuga. Thus the system of Sahamaran has practically been abolished. Nevertheless, within the past 50 years, I have seen the wife of a medical practitioner voluntarily accept death immediately when her husband died. Both the husband and wife were taken in the procession in the mourning cart. Such intense love of a chaste wife for her husband is a special case. Wow. Yikes. Okay. Evam vilampatinam vai parigriha mritam patim anichatinam nirharam arkostang sanyavratvartata. The time was appropriate for the body to be burned, but the queens, not allowing it to be taken away, continued lamenting for the dead body, which they kept on their laps. In the meantime, the sun completed its movements for setting in the west. Purport. According to the Vedic system, if a person dies during the daytime, it is customary for his funeral ceremony to be performed before the sun sets, regardless of whether he is burned or buried. And if he dies at night, the funeral must be completed before the next sunrise. Apparently, the queens continued lamenting for the dead body, the lump of matter, and would not allow it to be taken away for burning. This illustrates the strong grip of illusion among foolish persons who consider the body the self. Women are generally considered less intelligent. Because of ignorance only, the queens thought of the dead body as their husband, and somehow or other thought that if the body were kept, their husband would remain with them. Such a conception of the self was certainly for Gokara, cows and asses. We have actually seen that sometimes, when a cow's calf has died, the milkman cheats the cow by presenting before her the dead body of her calf. Thus the cow, who would not otherwise allow milking, licks the dead body of the calf and allows herself to be milked. Oh, that's so sad. This substantiates the description of the Shastra, that a foolish man in the bodily concept of life is like a cow. Not only do foolish men and women consider the body the self, but we have even seen that the dead body of a so-called yogi was kept for days by his disciples, who thought that their guru was in samadhi. When the decomposition began, and a bad smell unfortunately began to overwhelm the yogic power, the disciples allowed the dead body of the so-called yogi to be burned. Thus, the bodily concept of life is extremely strong among foolish persons who are compared to cows and asses. Nowadays, great scientists are trying to freeze dead bodies so that in the future, these frozen bodies may again be brought to life. Is that true? That's like Superman, right? The incident narrated by Hiranyakasipu from history must have taken place millions of years ago, because Hiranyakasipu lived millions of years ago and was even then quoting from history. Thus the incident occurred before Hiranyakashipu's lifetime, but the same ignorance in the bodily concept of life is still prevalent, not only among laymen, but even among scientists who think they will be able to revive frozen corpses. Apparently, the queens did not want to deliver the dead body for burning because they were afraid of dying with the dead body of their husband. Tatraha pretabandhunam ashrutya paridevitam ahatan balako bhutva yama swayam upagataha. While the queens were lamenting for the dead body of the king, their loud cries were heard even from the abode of Yamaraj. Assuming the body of a boy, Yamaraj personally approached the relatives of the dead body and advised them as follows. Okay, so Yamaraj personally approached the relatives of the dead body and advised them as follows. Purport. Sometimes a living entity is forced to give up his body and enter another one according to the judgment of Yamaraj. It is difficult, however, for the conditioned soul to enter another body unless the present dead body is annihilated through cremation or some other means. The living being has attachment for the present body and does not want to enter another, and thus, in the interim, he remains a ghost. If a living being who has already left his body has been pious, Yamaraj, just to give him relief, will give him another body. Since the living being in the body of the king had some attachment to his body, he was hovering as a ghost, and therefore Yamaraj, as a special consideration, approached the lamenting relatives to instruct them personally. Yamaraj approached them as a child, because a child is not restricted, but is granted admittance anywhere, even to the palace of a king. Besides this, the child was speaking philosophy. People are very much interested in hearing philosophy when it is spoken by a child. So this is where we're scheduled to read up today. Let's see how long. Should we read any of these instructions? Let's see, 1 second. Okay. 37 to 57 describe the instructions of Yamaraj to the queens of Suyajña. Maybe we should just read a couple verses at least from Yamaraj's instructions. Let's see. Yeah, let's read like 2 verses. Because, yeah, tomorrow we have over 6,000 words, and so that will just make it so we don't have too much to read tomorrow. Śrīyama uvacha aho amisham vayasadikanam vipashyatam loka vidim vimoha yatra gatas tatra gatam manushyam swayam sadharma apishocantya partam. Sri Yamaraj said, "Alas, how amazing it is! These persons who are older than me have full experience that hundreds and thousands of living entities have taken birth and died. Thus they should understand that they are also apt to die, yet still they are bewildered. The conditioned soul comes from an unknown place and returns after death to that same unknown place. There is no exception to this rule, which is conducted by material nature. Knowing this, why do they uselessly lament?" Purport. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 2.28, "Avyakta dini bhutani vyakta madhyani bharata avyakta nidadhanyeva tatra ka paridevana." All created beings are unmanifest in their beginning, manifest in their interim state, and unmanifest again when they are annihilated. So what need is there for lamentation? Accepting that there are 2 classes of philosophers, one believing in the existence of the soul and the other not believing in its existence, there is no cause for lamentation in either case. Non-believers in the existence of the soul are called atheists by the followers of Vedic wisdom. Yet even if, for argument's sake, we accept the atheistic theory, there is still no cause for lamentation. Apart from the separate existence of the soul, the material elements remain unmanifested before creation.
From this subtle state of unmanifestation comes manifestation, just as from ether, air is generated. From air, fire is generated. From fire, water is generated. And from water, earth becomes manifested. From the earth, many varieties of manifestations take place. For example, a big skyscraper is manifested from the earth. When it is dismantled, the manifestation becomes again unmanifested and remains as atoms in the ultimate stage. The law of conservation of energy remains, but in the course of time, things are manifested and unmanifested. That is the difference. Then what cause is there for lamentation in either manifestation or unmanifestation? Somehow or other, even in the unmanifested stage, things are not lost. Both at the beginning and at the end, all elements remain unmanifested, and this does not make any real material difference. If we accept the Vedic conclusion as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Anta Vanta ime deha, that these material bodies are perishable in due course of time, nityasyokta sharirina, but that the soul is eternal, then we must remember always that the body is like a dress. Therefore, why lament the changing of a dress? The material body has no factual existence in relation to the eternal soul. It is something like a dream. In a dream we may think of flying in the sky or sitting on a chariot as a king. But when we wake up, we can see that we are neither in the sky nor seated on the chariot. The Vedic wisdom encourages self-realization on the basis of the non-existence of the material body. Therefore, in either case, whether one believes in the existence of the soul or one does not believe in the existence of the soul, there is no cause for lamentation for loss of the body. In the Mahabharata it is said, Adarshanad ihayata punash chadarshanam gata. This statement could support the theory of the atheistic scientists that the child in the womb of the mother has no life, but is simply a lump of matter. To follow this theory, if the lump of matter is aborted by a surgical operation, no life is killed. The body of a child is like a tumor, and if a tumor is operated upon and thrown away, no sin is involved. The same argument could be put forward in regard to the king and his queens. The body of the king was manifested from an unmanifested source, and again it became unmanifested from manifestation. Since the manifestation exists only in the middle between the 2 points of unmanifestation, why should one cry for the body manifested in the interim? Okay, we'll end here. I'll just read this translation. It is wonderful that these elderly women do not have a higher sense of life than we do. Indeed, we are most fortunate, for although we are children and have been left to struggle in material life unprotected by father and mother, and although we are very weak, we have not been vanquished or eaten by ferocious animals. Thus we have firm belief that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has given us protection, even in the womb of the mother, will protect us everywhere. Alright, so we'll continue reading Yamaraja's instructions tomorrow. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol. Jai Shishi Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari, Shishi Radha Vinod Bihari Ju Ki Jai, Shri Govinda Gopinath Maran Mohan Ju Ki Jai, Nitya Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashatarashatashmad, Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Srila Gurudev Ki Jai, Nitya Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashatarashatashmad, Srila Bhaktivedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai, Nitya Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashatarashatashmad, Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai,
Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashatarashatashmar Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashatarashatashmar Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitila Pravishta Mahabhagavat Srila Goksharas Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitila Pravishta Srila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai. Nitila Pravishta Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Rupa No Gauriya Guru Varga Ki Jai. Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jeev Gopal Bhatta Das Raghunath Shara Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासरी गौर भक्त वृंद की जाय। श्री क्षेत्र मंडल गौर मंडल व्रज मंडल मथुर वृंदावन धाम की जाय। सर्व अभिष्ट प्रदात गिरिराज महाराज की जाय। श्री राधा कुंड श्याम कुंड की जाय। श्री यमुना देवी गंगा देवी की जाय। श्री तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की जाय। श्री भक्ति देवी की जाय। श्री पूर्णमासी योग माया की जाय। श्री गोपेश्वर महादेव की जाय। श्री हरि नाम संकीर्तन की जाय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जाय। समागत गौर भक्त वृंद की जाय। श्री ग्रंथराज श्रीमद्-भागवतम की जाय। श्री भक्ति विघ्न विनाशंकारी श्री नृसिंह देव की जाय। भक्त प्रभा श्री प्रहलाद महाराज की जाय। श्री हरि नाम संकीर्तन की जाय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जाय। समागत गौर भक्त वृंद की जाय। श्रीनिताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशवश्च कृष्ण भक्ति पद देवी सत्यवताय नमो नमः। पंचकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। धन्यवाद प्रणाम सभी बड़ी हरि बोल। See you all tomorrow.